2-1. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great topic that I'm sure will be helpful in regards to helping with adversity, kind of your perspective, your lens, how you look at adversity. Pretty straightforward why most people would avoid it, but there's some deeper underlying things I'm hoping we'll get into, as well as kind of how the mind works through adversity, has a tendency to lean to, how you can process your understanding of being in an adversity situation, as well as why successful people lean into and embrace adversity, and then kind of some of the things you can do to kind of help walk you through the process. We're joined today by Dr. Roger Hall, he's business psychologist, executive coach, and public speaker. And we've got a couple of his books up here with another one coming out shortly. How you doing, Dr. Hall?
I'm doing well today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate this one. This one's one that I think people lean into more often. They can elevate kind of where they're at in their career and in their personal life, so that they can overcome adversity, not if it comes, but when it comes, right?
When it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's do a couple of quick housekeeping items here. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at MHC Realty. Our sponsor today is the Perfect Real Estate Business. We've been developing this over the last couple of decades, working in large part with Dr. Hall in regards to the business coaching, life coaching aspect, as well as some of the other tools that are absolute necessities to operate your business, from revenue sharing, profit sharing, lead generation. So feel free to reach out if you'd like to chat a little bit more about that. But otherwise, let's bring in Dr. Hall and chat about that first subject, which will probably be a very short answer, is why don't people like adversity?
Because it sucks. That's why. I mean, it's painful. It's unpleasant. Yeah. Well, nobody wants it just for its own sake. Because it's painful, and human beings, and I think all living creatures don't like pain because it's a threat. It's a threat to life.
Well, I think that's, I don't want to, make it overly complicated, because I can do that. But if your perspective is that adversity on it, in some instances can come with good, it puts a different lens on it. If you look at it as just always sucks, it can just always suck. But if you look at it, that, hey, I can learn, I can grow, I can mature, it doesn't always have to suck, right?
Right. Well, that's why I said adversity for its own sake.
Yeah,
it sucks. But if there is something to be gained from adversity, then people will embrace it. I was thinking of the example, when my kids were taking calculus, they said, "When am I ever going to use calculus?" And I said, well, let's see. The last time I solved a calculus equation was my freshman year in college, and I've never solved one since. And they said, so why do it? And I said, and these were my sons, and they were teenagers at the time and lifting weights. And I said, so when will you ever have to lift 100-pound bar off of your throat? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're down there lifting weights. How often in your life will you have a 100-pound bar laying on your throat? And they go, well, I hope never. And I said, okay, so why do you lift weights? Well, so that we can be strong to do other things. The end. So that was the lesson. We do hard things. We experience adversity because it trains us to do things that we do want to do. Mm-hmm. So we lift weights, that we physically exercise. It makes us sore. It makes us ache. Why do we do it? Well, partly because it feels good at the time when you're working out, but later it hurts, and sometimes at the time it hurts. But you do that so that it gives you greater ability to do the things that are important to you later. And that's the purpose of most adversity.
So is there a clear-cut way, maybe not totally clear-cut, but just in general, sometimes adversity, you're just going to have to say, this is going to suck. And there might not be anything that comes out of it, but just power through, versus the other adversity is like, hey, this is probably a growing opportunity. This is something I should maybe not dislike going through, but even maybe lean into it and appreciate that I'm going through it so I can be better.
Um, and what you're getting at is a mindset issue for whatever the adversity is. And so if you look at the Stoic philosophers, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, those guys, they all would argue that suffering is only as bad as you think about it. And so when our body experiences pain, it is pain, but if we're able to give it meaning and to give it purpose, then we can do something with it. And so there's a 2,000-year history, maybe 2,500-year history of being able to discipline our mind, creating our mindset to embrace adversity. And so people will ask the question, well, what about, a concentration camp? Because it killed more people than made it out alive. Well, this isn't the time or place, and perhaps I'm not qualified to know why the concentration camps existed and why they killed so many people. But when you read the memoirs of people who survived, they became better people. Elie Wiesel, Viktor Frankl, and I'm in the middle of one that I've never read before called The Choice, and I can't remember the name of the author. It's escaping me right now. But they all talk about how they survived and the lessons they learned from that made them better people. It's the same experience that we see with American prisoners of war, that they all say, I came out a better man. And so then the follow-up question is, well, do you want to do it again? To which they say, no.
Absolutely not.
I don't want to experience it again, but there's no doubt that there was benefit from the way I interpreted it. Do we want to create those toxic environments? No, we don't. And yet we see what's called post-traumatic growth with more people who experience suffering, trauma, than we see post-traumatic stress. And the Veterans Administration has done a lot of research on this, and they're finding ways to facilitate post-traumatic growth, both by selection of the people who are put in traumatic situations and then how they help them to recover from those traumatic situations. I do want to make a distinction, and this comes from an author that I respect who coined the term anti-fragile, and his name is Nassim Taleb, and he's a mathematician, a financier. He's not in the psychology business, but he coined this term anti-fragile, and he essentially says there's a dose relationship between suffering, adversity, or in his situation, chaos. And up to a point, it's beneficial. After that point, it's destructive. And so when we talk about lifting weights, it's like, yeah, you can lift weights up to a certain point, but no human being, because of our limited frame, can hold up 10,000 pounds. It will crush you. And so it's kind of dose dependent, which is you need some strain, you need some adversity, but at some point, everybody breaks. And so it's up to that point that your mindset can help you handle it. So I'm not talking about, let's create tsunamis for everybody to experience, because so many people will be destroyed. The scale of that destruction is so high. I'm not advocating for that. But I am saying if you survive, it will probably make you better up to a certain point. And after that certain point, you won't survive. It crushes you. Yeah, it will crush you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm notorious for overcomplicating things. So as I get older, I'm trying to simplify.
If that's your rep, let's go, buddy.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look at this, and I think this is a two-part question, but can I be as simple as looking at it from I'm either getting better or I'm getting bitter? Um,
It-
we hear that a
that's a
lot.
great way to look at it. Bitter or better? Yes, it's an
So,
easy way to remember this. Yes.
okay, so I think the second part of this is what is it that allows some people to, is it, you might have already answered it, some just get crushed. Who typically is able to make the switch from being better to being bitter? And maybe that's a broad question, but is there,
Well, let's go the other way. What differentiates those who become bitter from those who become better? And my quick answer is people who have had previous experience with adversity get better. People who have no previous experience with adversity and don't know how to handle it mentally,
they don't have the
they,
tools?
they don't have the tools. They're likely to get bitter. So the whole concept of anti-fragile is human beings um, benefit from small adversities in childhood and young adulthood, which are instrumental for training them to handle greater adversities later. So being pushed down on the playground and skinning your knee, as unpleasant as it is, and as much as every school teacher in America would like to make sure that never ever happened again, that no child was ever bullied, that teaches a kid a lesson in a small scale that they can then use because they know they can recover. They don't like it, it's unpleasant, but if they're given the right training about how to handle that situation, they can recover and then handle other bullies later. And so mild adversity in childhood and in young adulthood prepares us for even greater adversity later in life. But again, it's dose dependent. So
Yeah.
you got to grade your way up.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? You can't just take a crushing blow. I mean, you could if you'd built up some ability, some tools to handle larger adversity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could not. I've not got the training to take a punch from Mike Tyson. But Evander Holyfield, he can because he spent a lifetime training, right?
Yeah.
And so I would get crushed by that. Evander Holyfield would likely recover. It's not that it wouldn't hurt him, but he's got the training.
So this is it just popped into my head because it was a recent video I came across, but it's a fairly young kid. I don't know. He's probably 7, 8, 9. I don't know. And he's riding some kind of like bike or trike or something, and he's moving along at a fairly good clip, and they're watching him. Well, he kind of gets down where the parents are, and he just crashed and burned. But his response to that was he immediately just kind of did his tuck and roll, jumped up and went woohoo! Like that was just the coolest thing since sliced bread. He thought that was really cool. It's totally
Okay.
different than most like that you would see that because they're going to get scratched up or hurt and they start to cry. But instantly his take was different.
So my guess is there are two interpretations of that. One, he came out of the womb like that, or he was trained as an even younger child to tuck and roll, and this is part of life.
Okay.
And so we're seeing this point in time and we think, wow, that's a magic act. Well, it's like anything. You don't get to this magic act until you've done the training. So my guess is his parents probably taught him how to take a tumble, how to get up, how to
respond.
Yeah, so they taught him a mindset that will serve him well for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a good example because he was a young kid, but maybe it is. Our response to that child could be, "Oh no," like and just really make them feel like something catastrophic happened, and their response should be, "It's the end of the world." Or you've seen parents that are like, "Rub some dirt in it, walk it off, get over it."
And what the adults are teaching the child is which mindset to have when adversity strikes. Oh, they're there. This is too bad. Then the kid knows, oh, I'm supposed to feel hurt. The interpretation of an event is actually the human mind interprets pain based on its expectation of pain.
Mm.
So if you tell a person going to a dental office, when they drill on your teeth, it's going to be excruciating. Well, guess what? Those people are going to experience more pain than someone who goes in with the expectation it'll be uncomfortable, it'll be difficult, but it's manageable.
Yeah.
That doesn't make the pain disappear, but what we know about the human brain is that the interpretation of the pain signals is dependent on your expectation.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so that's applicable to young kids, adults. It's just, do you have the tools, and how are you going to respond to it?
Right.
And what's your perspective going into it? If I know it's coming.
There's some disadvantage of knowing pain is coming, because that creates anxiety. So if you know that a bad thing is going to happen, that will actually increase the pain. Anxiety increases your experience of pain.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So within reason. Makes sense.
Yeah, within reason. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the other items on our agenda is, successful people. I don't think anybody that thinks about it for any length of time would disagree that highly successful people just absolutely lean into adversity. Like, this is how they become successful. They solve problems. They get through things quicker than others do. They're super, resilient or anti-fragile. The higher you get, it seems like the more adversity you're going to have, because you only got to there because you've been able to show people you've overcome adversity.
Yeah, I think there's a general myth that successful people, live in this lap of luxury and there's no problems. Hey, money can solve a lot of problems,
but not all.
Yeah, I mean, it solves a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve all of them. Death comes to us all. Injury comes to us all, and we can't escape that, no matter how much money we have. And the more power a person has, we believe that makes it easier for them, but typically it does not. It makes it more complicated. And my experience with really great leaders is that almost all of them have had some significant suffering in their life. The people born with silver spoons in their mouth, who've never had any adversity, never had any hardship, they tend not to amount to anything.
Yeah, well, I like, we've covered this in previous podcasts, but the idea that, when you have that much power, a highly successful person learns how to control the excesses of their personality under that position.
Yeah.
Where you start throwing adversity at them, or just because it's life or it's whatever they're doing, because you're absolutely right. I can't imagine that there's highly successful people out there that aren't getting bombarded every day, because they're put in those positions because of their ability to overcome them. But anyway, just a couple of thoughts had popped into my mind that, those powerful people having to contend with the excesses of their personality, with being thrown adversity at the same time, that's not easy.
No, it isn't easy. Again, those people without power very often envy the public face of having that power, but they don't know what is behind that. They don't know everything it took to get there, and the adversity, the suffering, whatever, in order to have that power or influence or fame or whatever, or money. It's not easy.
Yeah, but it's easy to assume that it was easy for them. Like, oh, look at that lucky person.
Yeah, I mean, it took me 20 years to become an overnight success. That phrase. Right. Nobody sees the clipping coupons. Nobody sees the eating ramen noodles, or your furniture being stuff that you bought from the secondhand store. Nobody sees that at the end. They only see the end result. So it's easy to look at the end result and not realize the steps that took to get you there.
Well, isn't that the disconnect in part, maybe even in large part, of why people uh, don't become good at overcoming adversity? You know, if they were more aware that all the successful people they see in their life, whether it's they're successful with the relationships or their job or their personal life or their friends or whatever, there's a high degree of likelihood that that person is good at those aspects of their life because they got really good at adversity in those areas. So for people that are wanting to become successful to see that more often, wouldn't that bridge kind of that disconnect?
Oh yeah, it would absolutely bridge the disconnect. But who wants to watch somebody's life for 10 years? Because most of our lives are boring. What makes the news, what makes the Instagram reel is not all the slogging, because that's dull. Nobody's going to want to watch that. It's the highlight reel.
So, well, kind of. I mean, I think if people looked more and spent the time, yeah, you're not going to watch them for 10 years. But who is the gentleman that survived the camps? You just mentioned his name, Franco?
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. You know, his story, if you read his book, that book is as clear as I've ever seen as an individual that took the utmost adversity that I could ever think of and shifted the perspective and made it a point to become better and not bitter, and now has changed, I would think, the lives of a lot of people by
Oh,
sharing.
millions.
Yeah.
His book is life changing for anybody who reads it, and if you haven't read it yet, you should read it.
Now, don't, I mean, you know, his is extreme. You know, hopefully people don't ever go through that, but
Oh, heaven
wouldn't,
help us if we ever have concentration camps again. I mean, let's hope that never happens again.
yeah, no, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, for the, you know, if we had enough books, not documentaries, but autobiographies, you know, of successful people, my guess is you could go through kind of all of them.
They're all like that. Um, so I think part of our I, I guess what I'd recommend is, if you're looking for information to put in your mind the stories of people who have overcome adversity. And I think there's a class of movies and books that are about overcoming adversity, and those tend to be uh, fan favorites for a long time.
Yeah.
People love those kind of movies because it helps them model hope. And human beings, if we don't experience it ourselves, we can certainly learn from other people's examples. So read books like The Choice, read books like Man's Search for Meaning, um, um, The Hiding Place, which is Corey ten Boom's story as well. So um, these are great stories of tremendous adversity and the overcoming of that adversity. And if you're not much of a reader, then watch fiction. Read fiction where people overcome adversity, uh, or watch movies where those same things happen, because those models will help you to imagine, oh, that would be hard. I don't know how I would do it, but if somebody could do it, yeah, maybe I could do it too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. And I definitely want to get into talking about how people can deal with adversity, the tools that we talked about, the resources, things like that. But before that, this is maybe a little selfish on my end, but one of my approaches to life that I've changed significantly is, you know, I used to think I needed to be a sprinter and not a marathoner. So, you know, if I look back, uh, maybe some of it was self-inflicted because I was just running too fast and then I tripped over, you know, something and landed on my face. Um, so, you know, kind of getting to a point where I didn't have the tools or I wasn't, you know, ready for certain things, and wonder why it didn't play out as well as I had hoped. Um, Not being crushed, but definitely kind of setting yourself up for, it's like, well, yeah, look, you got ahead of yourself. You got out over your skis and you're wondering why you had a colossal, you know, crash.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if everything was easy? And so we very often look for a quick result, or a quick positive outcome, and it just doesn't work that way. And so we we will sometimes get frustrated. I mean, that's just human nature, that we don't see the success come as quickly as we'd like.
And try to create it before you're ready or
Yeah, yeah. Um, we'll sometimes, yeah, try to gin up a situation because we think we're ready, and clearly we're not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So, for whatever reason, you've got adversity coming at you, and it's
Mhm.
building up, or you just like what should people? Well, I kind of know the first answer. What should they be doing in order to get into a better place for adversity?
Um, well, I'll use uh, the work of a guy named Salvador Madi, who used the term hardiness to talk about this, and he had three C's. Um, they First is commitment, which is that you're fully engaged in life. Um, Challenge is to view life that this is a challenge to be learned from rather than a punishment from God. And then control, which is the sense that I can control, if not the outcome, at least my response to the situation. And so it's commitment, being fully engaged in life, not passively accepting life as it comes at you, but in taking initiative, being engaged. Challenge, viewing adversity as a challenge, not a punishment. Um, and control, the belief, true or not, that you have influence over the outcome. Which is one of the key points from Viktor Frankl. When he was in the showers in the concentration camp, they'd stripped him naked. They'd killed his parents. They'd killed his wife, who was pregnant with his child. They took his life's work, the manuscript of the book he was working on, all of his clothes. He had nothing, and he said, "They can take everything from me, but they can't take the content of my thinking." And so ultimately, that's the pivot point in his philosophy. It's also the same point for the Stoics, which is you can't control the outcomes, but you can control your thinking about your situation. So that's the first thing is to start to manage that discipline. And in order for your brain to have the resources to manage this, you've got to do all the things that successful people do. You got to get really good rest. You got to get good sleep. You got to take time away doing nothing to clear your head. Why do you need to do this? Well, your body has limited resources. Your brain occupies between 3 and 5% of has 3 to 5% of your body mass, but uses 20 to 25% of the fuel in your food. So your brain is highly sensitive to lack of fuel. And so you got to make sure you're you're managing that resource source. So you're eating high quality food, you're getting plenty of rest because your brain needs sleep in order to repair itself. So the tool in order to handle adversity is your brain. And so you've got to make sure you're taking care of your body in order to take care of your brain. So good nutrition, plenty of rest, physical activity, because physical activity actually increases blood flow to your brain, and that then helps it clean out all of the ick. And it also, it releases all these chemicals that make you feel better, but it also helps, sweep the place out. And that also happens in sleep as well.
Mm.
Your brain contracts and expands slowly in sleep, and so the cerebrospinal fluid washes away all the ick that
Mm.
is that your brain kind of casts off every day. So these are habits you need to do in order to give your brain the resources so that you can think your way through the problem.
Well, I love the fact that you went into the longer answer to that question, because what I was thinking was it would be the idea of metacognition, the thinking about your thinking, which you kept touching back on, that is monitoring where your train of thought is, and are you doing the things that are going to help you have a better train of thought, like right, the sleeping, the eating right, and all that. You've got to monitor that. Are you thinking about doing those things? What is your perspective on what you're going through? How are you going to overcome and be better at the end of this adversity?
It's all in your thinking. So like if I'm going to go, if I know I need to go get good sleep in order to manage the adversity I'm in, I've got to think first, oh, I got limited resources in my brain, so I need to recover there. All of that starts with metacognition. And for people who don't know that word, we've discussed it before, but if you've never heard it, meta means above. It doesn't mean Facebook. It means above. And cognition means thinking. So it's above thinking. It's thinking about your thinking.
Gotcha. So the other thing I've noticed too is kind of this, this is just me. I haven't read it anywhere. It's just kind of my experience, but kind of this compounding effect of different adversities coming all at once. So if you are good at, metacognition about this adversity, and you've gotten better at realizing what you think, what your perspective is, what your presupposition is, what your approach is, and get tools. But then now here comes this other adversity that is fairly foreign to you and new, that you've got to figure out how it is that you respond to that and how you get better, But now, life has a tendency to pile not just one, but two or three or four on top of it. And it just really, can feel overwhelming. Like you said, kind of that, what was the word you used earlier? You're crushed, or you're,
Yeah, you become crushed. I mean, everybody breaks. It's dose dependent. You need a certain amount, and after a certain amount, everybody breaks.
yeah. So I guess it's just a matter of being, of an awareness that those things are happening, and that you can control some better than others and not others. And you probably need to, pull some of those apart and realize it's not the whole world that's stopped rotating and you can hit the wall at 700 miles an hour, or, the sky's falling. It's just that
Yeah,
right now you have multiple of these things. And by the way, all of these will likely pass. Some might be permanent, if you're dealing with a death in the family or something, but
yeah. I mean, and at some point, we all die. So there is adversity that catches up with all of us. So I don't want to give that, the puppies, kittens, and unicorns answer that, it'll all be easy, because sometimes you don't recover. Sometimes you do get crushed. But until then, you can have a happier life and learn from it and become more successful through it than avoiding it your whole life. Yeah, I meet people occasionally who are really avoiding as much adversity as possible. They want a comfortable life. Awesome. That's good for them. In my definition, they'll never be successful. They may have money, they may have status, but they really won't be living a full, abundant, full throttle life.
yeah.
And there's so much more that you can have.
Have you heard the story of the buffalo and its unique attribute?
I do not. There's so many things I don't know, and this is another one of them.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and who knows if this is an urban myth or a wives' tale or whatever it is,
But it's a good story, so
but
you
it's a
may as
good
well
story. So they're the only ones that will go into a storm. When they see a storm coming, they go into it because they know that heading in that direction is going to get them kind of out of it sooner, versus most animals run away and they just inevitably kind of find themselves stuck in it a lot longer. Anyway,
Huh. No, I didn't know that.
so
But I mean, it may not be true, but it's such a good story, you should tell it anyway.
well, I love the idea, right? The
Yeah,
concept is, look, you can keep trying to run away. In life, we kind of know that most adversity doesn't just kind of disappear.
yeah, yeah,
It's just going to be this swirling thing that you eventually have to address. So if you're the buffalo, you lean in and you get through it.
you
Part
get
part
through
of
it,
it's
right?
going to get rough, and then you're going to get to the center of that, depending on what kind of storm it is, and maybe it'll chill a little bit, and then all of a sudden here comes some aftermath, and you get to deal with it. But anyway, I just
Yeah,
thought that was interesting.
yeah, and bison are better prepared for blizzards than, say, you and me, because because of I mean, they're generally a hardier animal. They live their lives outdoors. They have these large fur coats, so they're the way their blood supplies the different parts of their body, they're able to handle it better than you and me. But I think it's a great analogy that we humans, because of our brains, we have a competitive advantage over lots of other uh, creatures, because we can think our way through it. We can see our way to the end. I mean, we're able to imagine an outcome.
Yeah, well, and I kind of like that analogy even on the human side of things, because the bison that you were talking about, they've got all these tools kind of from a biological perspective, but we as humans, we got tools if we're, uh, find ways to be anti-fragile and become better
Yep.
instead of bitter. Like this, we kind of become the bison of the human adversity space,
Yeah,
you know?
human beings have, again, and our competitive advantage is our brain. We're not stronger. We're not sharp teeth. We don't have sharp claws, but we do have these massive brains. So let's use the feature of human beings that makes us fundamentally different than all of the other mammals
Yeah.
to our benefit, which is our ability to imagine and create in the future.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I think a lot of the takeaways are, adversity isn't if but when. So just have a different perspective on adversity, acquire
Hmm.
tools so that
Yep.
you can become better at handling adversity, right? Become anti-fragile instead of just becoming bitter. And
Hmm.
then, by the way, once you're in these adversity situation, there's tools, primarily the way that you think, that's going to help you best power through that adversity, and certainly going to enable you to either grow, a little bit or a lot of it, depending on how you choose to take something out of that particular circumstance, right? You could learn just a
Yeah.
little bit and go, oh, okay, yeah, I got something, so it wasn't a total waste. Or you'd go, man, I really stretched myself. I really grew. I dug in, took responsibility of whatever was my responsibility in that adversity. And I can't control anybody else, but I'm going to be different, in the future, so that my peace isn't there or is minimized.
Right. Right. And your comments reminded me. We had talked before the interview started about the sympathetic and the
Mm.
parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm.
and under adversity, the sympathetic or the fight, flight, faint, or freeze system turns on, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, and repair system, turns off. And in order for you to be prepared for adversity, you've got to spend time in the parasympathetic, which is lowering your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure, and you can practice these things. And they're apps, that you can get, and
Hmm.
little finger oxygen sensors and blood pressure sensors that you can get, you can then train yourself to get into that parasympathetic state. So these tools exist that if you want to practice, you can learn how to do that, all of which will prepare your body so that you can, in the middle of adversity, shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic system.
So am I misguided, or overly dumbing this down or anything? But is it fair to say, from a simplistic standpoint, that basically the more anxious or worried that we get, the more of our instinctual side of our brain kicks in, as opposed to the logical side, and therefore isn't super helpful in helping us to address this adversity?
No, so anxiety is the imagination. Or worry is the imagination of fear in the future. Fear is life preserving, and so it's not that you want to get rid of the sympathetic or the fear reaction, because that will help you in that moment. But the fear response is an acute or very short response. Um, the thing that we humans are really able to do better than anybody is we can, once the fear response is over, we can imagine it over and over and over and over again and keep our body in this sympathetic state. And so I don't want anybody to think that fear is counterproductive. I mean, it'll keep you alive in anxiety. It prepares you for that acute stress. And and so what happens is your limbic system, which is the the middle of your brain, a number of different structures, sends signals up to the prefrontal, which is right above your eyes, and shuts it down. And that's adaptive in a crisis. You don't need to be solving abstract, complex problems like if you're driving down the road and a deer runs out in front of you.
Right.
You need immediate response. Well, your limbic system hijacks the prefrontal. Well, the prefrontal is where all the metacognition and the ability to self-regulate happens. So you need to be able to turn that back on and then down-regulate the limbic system to turn off the sympathetic reaction. It's going to turn on to save your life, but if you don't practice the downregulation of calming yourself down and
Hmm.
turning the parasympathetic back on, human beings are really good at keeping it going, and that's really unhealthy,
Gotcha.
and will prevent you from having long-term success. So it's about self-regulation.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Of course, we blew right by the 30 minutes, but we're not doing too bad today.
Yet again.
Yeah. Well, it's all good stuff, so it's worth it. But yeah, let's make sure that folks know how to get a hold of you and what resources you have available for them on your website.
Yeah, on my website, you get a hold of my books, Staying Happy, Being Productive, The Big 10 Things Successful People Do. You can get a more recent book called DIY Brain, which is stories to help you monitor and manage your thinking. The new one coming out is DIY Leader Brain, helping you to learn how to monitor and manage the emotions of others. And then my leadership guidebook, which is called Expedition. And very shortly, my course, Freak Out, Fear Less, Live More, will be available on my website, and we hope to have the Expedition up on my website in relatively short order as well. The 15 course lesson that we created.
Yeah, and that's in large part what we go through on the real estate side of things, is taking you through that leadership course. Because as we've talked about in the past, everybody's a leader, whether they think they are or not. So, how do you become a good leader? And obviously, one of the best ways is to understand who you are, what you're about, what drives you, and even kind of where your weaknesses are. So it's been an amazing course. So, as always, Dr. Hall,
I forgot to say the name of the website. It's drrogerhall.com, just like drrogerhall.com. I forgot to say that.
Well, I think usually I say that and then you talk about it. So my bad.
No worries.
Anyway, but good stuff. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate you jumping on. We always really value your insight and help, and we'll wish everybody a blessed one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.